Welcome to the Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies. The Dying Breed Movie Club was formed in 2006 and Phil Meets the Movies was created in 2010. And this is the next evolutionary step for both. So we decided to go with an audio blog. We hope you enjoy our first episode of the Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies.
The Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies. With your host, Phil Congleton. Guest starring Mike Gleason, Corey Yaktus, Rich Shumaker. Music by Garth Ivan. Directed and edited by Phil Congleton. Episode 1, Billy Crystal.
Greetings from the beautiful Attic Lounge at Harry's in Salisburyville, PA. My name is Phil Congleton. In honor of the upcoming Oscars on Sunday, February 26th, we thought it would be cool to talk about its host, Billy Crystal. The thread we are going to explore takes various turns in certain directions. The thread's main body contains a discussion surrounding the importance of 4 of his movies that are his best, or at least his most important. We begin with Billy's early work and follow the threads that connect the 4 movies from director to co-star to screenwriter, and eventually come full circle back to Billy and beyond. We will try and reference a few of his other films and TV shows along the way also. First, let me introduce my guests. He was the guy who actually came up with this idea, doing Phil Meets the Movies, taking it to its next step. This was his idea. He is a stand-up comedian, well on his way to making a name for himself, and an accomplished video editor and producer, Mr. Mike Gleason.
Yay! Hey, good to be here. Good to be here. You dropped the highlighter.
He is an accomplished video editor, producer, and filmmaker, and a Billy Crystal fan, Corey Yaktus.
I would agree 50%.
Hey! And finally, he is a talented juggler performer who is well versed in film and the video world, especially when he combines these elements together. Rich Shumaker.
Thanks much, Phil.
Thanks for having me.
So how are you guys doing?
Great. Let's start this thing.
All right, we are. So, Mike,
The anticipation.
you mentioned before we started recording that you're upset that Eddie Murphy dropped out of the Oscars. What are your true feelings about Eddie Murphy dropping out of the Oscars?
Wait, what do you mean by true feelings? I mean, I'm upset. I was looking forward to him hosting, and then I was disappointed. I mean, it's not like I was disappointed that Billy was going to be the host, but it just seemed like last year they tried to go young, and they failed miserably.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be mean, but I watched it and I just didn't enjoy it.
But they went young in the wrong way.
Smart,
You got
right.
2 people who've never hosted anything.
Well, they're also
Franco
not stand-up
and
comedians. They
Hathaway.
don't really. They're script
not
people.
funny.
They're good at scripts.
And Franco is such a straight man. Like he's.
Yeah.
I prefer the term cardboard.
Cardboard?
Yeah, it's
there's
cardboard.
that. I think he's hilarious in the things he does with his brother.
Yeah.
Online, the acting 101 thing.
Absolutely.
I thought that was fun.
In fact, the only thing I liked about last year's Oscars was Billy Crystal and the Bob Hope segment.
But I just feel like this is just like, oh, we're going back to the same old, same old. And they're like, oh, we want to be young, because we need young people to go to the movies. And now it's back to being old.
I'm kind of curious. The last time I saw Billy Crystal host, he seemed bitter and jaded by Hollywood. He seemed like he was, I don't know, envious of everybody that was being nominated, and it's like, what happened to my career?
But then
That's what
when-
it felt like.
But
We
then
have
when
that-
they
I
introduced
agree.
him for that Bob Hope segment, he came out to a standing ovation.
Well, he deserves
He's
a
Billy
standing
Crystal.
ovation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I
Doesn't
see.
mean I'm not going to make fun of him.
Exactly.
But aren't there other people that you would have gone with for host before him? I know they needed somebody in a pinch because it was sort of last minute.
Yeah, but yeah.
My favorite part of the Oscars over the years went from like 1989 to about 2003. It was the Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, Steve Martin era. I thought those were some of the best Oscars.
They're all
ever.
comedians, though. I think that's one of the keys.
Well, I've always
to
said
all
I
three.
think the only good host is a person who's funny.
That's the reason
And a
I wanted
comedian.
Eddie Murphy. I'll be honest, because Eddie is always cutting edge. Like, even when he's not trying to be, I think he is. I mean, he's old now, but I still think he has that Eddie Murphy raw inside of him, which just blurts out just for no apparent reason.
Yeah, I think it's there, but man, those last 10 movies have all been pull my finger. You know, it used to be he was raw and then delirious.
Yeah.
But you know, when you do the same character or like 10 different characters in the same movie, I think it's gone.
I agree. I think what it came down to is how much money you're going to pay me. No problem, I'm there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
He even said that in an interview recently, where he was just kind of like, yeah, that's why would you turn down that kind of money?
Also,
like,
like,
why?
Yeah,
was
right.
It was like a Rolling Stone interview where he was just
No, I
talking
mean, what was
about.
the price? What were they going to
Oh,
pay?
I don't know, but he's just talking about doing Pluto Nash and all these other sort of terrible movies.
But I'm happy with a comedian, and I was happy that they got Billy because they needed
I would
him
have
in
gone
the
Jon
pinch.
Stewart.
Jon
Stewart's always good.
Jon Stewart
yeah.
was good too. He was fabulous, just fabulous for the Oscars.
But he's on the political trail, like promoting his friends, so it won't happen. I think Billy's a great choice as long as he doesn't go the route that you're talking about. If he goes bitter, we're all effed.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be good.
I think there it is.
I think it'll just skew old and.
Okay, now here's a good question then. Do you at this point, it hasn't happened yet, do you think this year's is going to be better or worse than last year's? Because honestly, I watched last year's and it was a train wreck with a car wreck on top of it.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they have Billy, they're going with the comedy angle again, it's going to be better. I mean, I like James Franco.
So what we're
but
saying
he's
is
cardboard.
last year's bar wasn't set too high for this year.
Last year was probably the worst in memory, right?
Yeah.
Hosting wise, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I like the movies this year better than last year.
Oh.
Too.
I really want to see
nominated.
The Artist, actually. I'm really depressed
Yeah,
that I
it's one
haven't
of them
seen
I
The
haven't
Artist.
seen, yeah.
And the funniest thing is the ticket refunds, which I'm sure you've heard of, where people were going out to the box office. Your sound's all effed up. I need my money back. And it's been happening a lot. So they actually put up a warning. This is a silent film, which means no audio. So enjoy it.
So this is why we picked Billy Crystal. We originally were going to go Eddie Murphy, but since he dropped out, we were like, okay, we're going to just do Billy Crystal. So we were like, let's do Billy Crystal. He did a 1978 movie called Rabbit Test, directed by Joan Rivers, which, by the way, has 2.8 stars on the Internet Movie Database.
I go there for actual facts. I could care less what the movie gets. I normally go to Rotten Tomatoes for...
Well, I have a philosophy that if you have 5 stars or more, you're doing pretty good on IMDb.
That makes sense.
Oh yeah, they let any Yahoo critique on IMDb.
Yeah.
Well, anyone can. All you have to do is
Press a button.
Have a keyboard.
Just log in.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Rotten Tomatoes. I think that they're, like, I've been watching them for, meaning I go there, I go, what do people say? The critics usually say one thing, and people say another. I normally go with what the people say. I go to the movie and I say, hey, they were pretty close.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'm wrong, or they're wrong, or something's
Plus,
wrong.
you have to deal with a lot of haters. You have to deal with a lot of people that don't
on the
know what
internet?
they're talking about.
I think you're making that up.
I know. I'm making shit up out of my ass.
No, you're absolutely right.
So that was his first starring role in the Joan Rivers movie Rabbit Test. It's a movie about the world's first pregnant man. It's a must-see. So he finished up Soap. He did his 1-year stint on SNL, and then in 1986, that's when he came out with Gregory Hines in Running Scared. I personally believe that it was in the late 80s, early 90s, where he did City Slickers. That area in there is probably where he hit his peak.
Okay, let's talk about Princess Bride.
Okay.
Overall, I
we
think
can
it's one of
skip
the
that.
best films I've ever seen in my life, and I give it an A. A movies mean I can watch it back to back to back to back to back. Like, I could watch that probably 7 or 8 times in a row before I have to get up and get a beer. So,
It's
I mean,
also
like,
it's also on the 1001 movie list.
huge fan. I also think it's a great chick flick, meaning that every girl that I've met that's seen that film, they really like it. So a lot of times guys will love a movie and girls will hate a movie. And that's one of those films that bridges that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to some dudes who, when I say have you ever seen The Princess Bride? They just like freak out. Like they're like, I don't want to see a movie called The Princess Bride. You know?
You're saying they
don't-
won't watch
yeah,
it because of the
they've
name.
never heard of it before, you know, or they don't know about
Here's
it.
the counter to that.
And they
You
hear,
should not hang out with people like
they
that.
hear Princess Bride and they're like, oh my god, it's a chick flick. It's
Here's
silly.
the counter to that, because I think I know the market and the demographic. Andre the Giant's in it.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
I know
Right?
exactly. It's got Andre the Giant. You're gonna love it.
Doesn't Falk at the beginning explain to him because Fred Savage doesn't
Yeah,
want to watch the
he
movie.
does
It's
the
called
exact
Princess
same
Bride.
thing.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
goes through the whole thing of why you should. There's fencing, there's fighting, there's that's a terrible
Giant.
impression.
That was
It's awful.
But then in the middle of all this
It's
chaos,
entirely Very fight.
but in the middle of all this chaos that's going on, we slow down and we go to the house of Miracle Max, and that's when Billy comes out and does his bit.
Okay, now the reason they're going to the House of Miracle Max isn't because we slowed down. It's because someone's died.
He died.
Or is
Yeah,
about
it's
to
a miracle.
die.
He
Right,
needs a miracle.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So.
But the action slows down. Whereas Carrie Elways, what was his name in the movie?
Wesley.
Wesley. He's dead
The
on the
Dread Pirate
table.
Roberts.
He's
Yes.
dead on the
Oh,
table,
my sweet Wesley.
and Billy comes out and does his thing, and I think that's most people remember that scene the most because
Well,
alright,
the thing that makes me uncomfortable about that scene is when they take that chocolate-covered walnut and stick it in his mouth. I keep on thinking, oh, he's gonna choke.
yeah.
It's like
How's
the
he gonna
chocolate
swallow that?
coating. It helps it make it go down.
It's okay, he's dead.
You know, I think too few people recognize
careful,
her
Riz.
performance in that.
I know
Carol
exactly.
Kane.
Carol
That's
Kane.
it.
I think she was awesome in that.
She
Yeah,
was. She
yeah.
played a great
And she was just
counterpoint to
fresh
Miracle
off.
Max because you gotta have some balls. To,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I remember. The two
And
of
she
them
just
together.
ended her run on Taxi. She was Locke's wife.
She was genius in that.
girlfriend.
Yeah.
So she worked with the great Andy Kaufman for a while. So
What 4 movies are we doing, Phil?
we are going to do When Harry Met Sally from 1989, City Slickers from 1991, Mr. Saturday Night from 1992, and Forget Paris from 1995.
When Harry Met Sally is about what happens when Harry meets Sally.
Very good. Very good.
It's a documentary.
It's everybody knows When Harry Met Sally. I feel like more than any other Billy Crystal movie, City Slickers and even The Princess Bride, I feel like more people have seen When Harry Met Sally because it became the sort of prototype for a romantic comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and really just kind of set the bar for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it set it pretty high too.
Set it very high.
Mhm.
It's Billy Crystal. It's Meg Ryan. It's Meg Ryan very early on at her cutest before Needles and Interface.
I have to admit,
And I love Meg Ryan.
she looked very cute in that.
And it's a story of their on again, off again relationship over a long period of time.
What I was going to say about that though is it has a lot to do with Meg Ryan being on and off and on for the simple fact that, as Harry points out, a man once he likes a woman was just wanting one thing, and so I think right straight through the film, I think he was mad with her, but I think if she said yes, he would have been there, which is kind of, in my opinion, what happened.
Yeah. Now look, I've always loved When Harry Met Sally. That's why I think it was assigned to me. I watched it this time. I didn't love it as many times, as much as I have in the past, because I've probably seen it, over a dozen times at this point. But as time goes by, I begin to dislike Billy Crystal's character more and more.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, that is the same thing I noticed too. That
he's a guy in a certain era
Mhm.
where he's very chauvinistic,
Mhm.
and I feel like as time kind of goes by and we get into 2000s and 2010s, it's not as acceptable.
He's a dated.
way
He's
to
a
go.
dated figure. Is what it comes out.
He's a
comes
dated
out
like
to.
stereotype
Mhm.
at this
Right.
point. And it was interesting to for the first time kind of dislike his character, because I feel like I was ambivalent to it, his character up until now. But then watching some of these other films
Mhm.
where I really dislike his
Mhm.
character, which
Yeah.
we'll get to,
Mhm.
it makes me start to dislike Billy.
Yeah.
Because he plays people I find despicable,
Mhm.
or at a minimum, I don't want to root for.
Yeah.
Is he just not a likable guy, and is that like,
Well,
that's what he
I think the 80s filmmaking was a lot like that, though. They felt you really had to make somebody, in order to achieve that arc of character, you really had to make somebody despicable and kind of crappy. So they really, at the end, when they realize all of this stuff that they've been doing wrong, that you go, oh, see, he gets it, finally.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
He's grown.
But I feel like that's sort of the flaw with I mean, and again, I like When Harry Met Sally, but when you compare this to Forget Paris, which we'll talk about in a little bit, both deal with on again, off again relationships, and I feel like because the movie ends where it ends, it happens to be on at this point
Mhm.
in When Harry Met Sally, but why, as a viewer, am I to believe that it's not going to be off again a couple years from now?
Mhm.
Same thing as we'll see in Forget Paris.
I, at the very least, at the end of When Harry Met Sally, was rooting for him. Because
Absolutely.
I liked
Yeah.
Meg Ryan.
Absolutely.
That was the key for me. I liked her. I didn't think that Billy Crystal's character deserved her at the
Right.
end, just because he made this speech, which, in my mind, earlier, when I saw that as a much younger me, thought that was bigger. I thought that speech was much more.
Yeah, the line where he says, when you finally decide that you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, you want the rest of your life to start now.
Yeah. Now I have changed a lot since I saw that movie first. When I first saw the movie, I don't think I had ever been in a serious relationship or an on again, off again. I never started with an on.
Right.
So
right.
For me, I didn't really get the movie the same way I did when I watched it recently for this, and I hadn't watched the movie probably in a decade.
Yeah.
And I forgot how good of a movie it was, and how well directed it was, and there's so much humor in it. And one thing that Bruno Kirby plays the really seedy, slimy guy to sort of make Billy, well, at least he's not as bad as this guy.
Right.
That sort of helps Billy Crystal's character be less smarmy.
Absolutely.
Because Bruno's smarmier.
I think when Harry Met Sally did a lot of cool scenes too, that like from a directing standpoint, which I guess gets us to Reiner, but there's just some really clever things that they do. There's an entire conversation between Bruno and Billy where they're at a Giants football game and the wave is going on.
Yes.
So throughout the duration of the
and they're
scene,
not even paying attention.
they stand up and sit down. No, but they stand up and sit down with the wave.
Still laughed out loud.
That's just
That's
just a great
genius
bit that they came up with. And
I wouldn't be surprised if they just picked the location, picked the time, shot the film, and then they just went with it. Like, honestly.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
I want to try and set the tone for When Harry Met Sally. It's 1989, but it actually starts in 1977. So
different time era for sure.
So by the time you get to the end of the movie, you're in 1989, and when I try to go watch older movies, I try to put myself in that frame of mind. If it's a 1989 movie, I try and...
Well, since you're ancient and you lived through it, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, but it gets a little bit more difficult with stuff from the 50s and the 40s.
Yeah.
You gotta just take from what you've learned through history and all that. What was the life like back then?
So overall, the takeaway for you though from Harry Met Sally was that when you were younger and less experienced, I guess it was a more, I don't know, you liked it more. Like you would give it a higher grade, I guess, as Phil would say. But when you watched it now, would you lower your grade based on not overall, but I mean, if you saw it for the first time, would you give it a lower grade?
I wouldn't lower the grade just because. I mean, it set the precedent for what came after that. I feel like romantic comedies up until then, I don't know how existent they really were. I mean, they were just movies, but I don't know how much that was a genre. I can't really think of too many great romantic comedies prior to When Harry Met Sally. At least it sort of gave birth to all the other Meg Ryan movies and Tom Hanks movies that came after that, which I think carried that along.
I think that certainly was the catalyst for that style of romantic comedy, but I mean, prior to that...
There's always been
romantic
comedy.
But yeah, I guess I mean more that style.
I guess you're talking about more of like a prototype. If we were to just take that film and reshoot it with modern actors, we'd probably be able to make equal amount of money because it's timeless in the way in which it is.
What you're saying is When Harry Met Sally is the Star Wars of its genre.
Sure. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. No, it's a good movie. I think it still holds up. I don't think, like Phil was saying, you need to he likes to watch movies and keep in mind the era where they were made. I don't feel like that one falls apart.
No, I think it still holds up.
Almost 25 years later. I feel like it's still pretty solid.
There's a lot of younger people who probably will never watch this movie because they just think it's old, it's dated.
Absolutely. Especially when you watch the very, very beginning of it and you see Meg Ryan's hair and you're like, I cannot watch this.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's 1977. That's 1977. And Billy's got the sideburns.
Right.
They did a good job with that. He actually looks like
Billy
he's
just
in
likes makeup, as we'll see as we go through all these
yes,
things.
I've noticed that too.
He loves the
But here, let me just help you out with setting the tone for 1989. The 486 microprocessor was released in 1989.
Blazing speed.
The Berlin Wall came down in 1989. Tiananmen Square happened in 1989.
So politically, it was a pretty turbulent time.
The three hottest movies of 1989 were Batman, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Lethal Weapon 2. Music was Duran Duran and Paul McCartney. You got the big hair.
I feel like so many of those things, though, don't even come into play in the movie.
They don't.
The movie just kind of hangs out in its own bubble, where Yeah, it starts in the 70s and ends in the 80s, but you could time shift that anywhere and just cover like a 10-year span.
Which is interesting.
It doesn't matter. The outside
because all
world
that
doesn't
stuff
affect
was
it.
happening in 1989, and yet this movie has removed itself from that. So like it is kind of ageless. Like it does hold up.
Your iconic scenes, you know, the orgasm scene at Katz's Deli, you could do that in 2012.
That's probably
Same
one
thing.
of the best scenes ever. The Katz's Deli scene, though, for me, it was an incredible scene. But when I found out that was Reiner's mom, it took it to a different level for me.
Yeah,
honestly.
I want to see the footage of Reiner doing that, because he actually sat in that chair and did the whole scene. I want that footage.
I agree.
So I'm gonna end this by saying that I personally give it an A-. It is on the 1001 movie list.
I'd probably go with a B+ if I had to go with something, just because I couldn't watch it in endless rotation. I mean, I could watch the couple of scenes rotated over and over, but after a certain point, I'd have to just.
Are there any romantic comedies though that you could watch in endless rotation?
Princess Bride, oddly enough.
Okay.
Going back to Harry Met Sally, then I would still only give it a B+. Maybe I just don't like romantic comedies.
That's kind of what I was just getting at. It's like, okay, maybe the highest you'll give a romantic comedy.
Well, I think because this one's held at such a high level,
I would give it an A. I mean, it made me feel something watching the movie, and what a lot of these movies did for me was knowing how much I have changed over the decades since I've watched it.
So the next thread.
Ooh.
What?
I think I know what movie we're going to.
What's the next movie?
Well, you mentioned, or maybe it was you who mentioned it. Bruno Kirby is in When Harry Met Sally. He's one of the supporting characters. Well, he went along with Billy Crystal. They moved on to do City Slickers.
Oh, I didn't mean to boo.
Unboo!
City Slickers is about three guys who desperately need a vacation, who decide to go on a retreat at a ranch to do a cattle drive. And there's all these things going on with each guy. Billy's kind of burned out and sick of his job. Daniel Stern, who is Phil, I believe. That's easy to remember. He's involved in a really bad divorce right now, and comedy ensues. It's
And growth.
and growth.
And Jack Palance. We should mention Jack Palance.
And Jack
And one of
Palance.
the best roles ever. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah.
Oscar nominated or Oscar winning?
Winning. He won the Oscar for that.
Winning.
For-
He's in a movie for about
Yes.
4 minutes too.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, he won the Oscar for that,
And did the one-handed
and he
push-up
did the
on
one-handed
stage.
push-ups on the
That's right.
stage. Yes.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that I think though was actually an audition for another film, because that's what he said beforehand. You're not ever too old to do movies, and I can prove it, or something like that, because I'm not good with that. He
Gonna
drops
have
to
to
the
look
floor,
that up.
did the one-handed push-up, and I think that was his audition for like 2 or 3 other films at the same time. And a lot of people say that he was given that because of the body of work.
Yeah.
It wasn't really City Slickers per se. I mean, Palance had I don't know, a couple hundred films by then. Easy.
See, he's in one act of that film, not even the entire act. The second act is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We don't actually get to New Mexico till 28 minutes into the movie, so there's this big build-up.
I don't know if I would say it was big build-up. I mean, that's what I've noticed about modern films is they don't build up enough, and then you get into the action, and then you're like, really?
And you have no investment in the characters.
None at all.
Bruno Kirby's character, Ed, he is like the driving force in the film, I think, because he's the one that comes up with the idea. He's the one that, in the beginning of the movie, they're in Spain.
Oh yeah,
for the
running of the bulls.
Yeah. That was his idea, and Billy's like yelling at him the whole time. He's
Yeah,
like,
Billy was opposed to the entire thing.
Billy is opposed to the entire thing.
But he goes along with every single one.
It's his best friend.
Yeah, yeah.
You gotta do
Well,
stupid
I
shit
think
with your
he's
best
trying to work through his issues, but trying to hide the fact that he's trying to work through his issues.
It's my favorite Billy Crystal movie because I just remember some of the great lines in the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
The VCR scene. I know, granted, it's 2012 now. VCRs, what the hell is that? Well, when this movie came out, VCRs were big. And getting back to Jack Palance, he has probably one of the best lines in the movie when he goes, "I crap bigger than you."
That is a funny line, but I think one of my favorite lines that always stuck with me from the first time that I watched it was, he's talking about, you city folk, you spend 50 weeks of your life tying knots in your rope, and you come up here for 2 weeks and try to untie them. Somehow that always resonated with me when I was younger. I was like, yeah, we do spend all of our lives like in such stress and putting all of this on ourselves, and we try to fix it by going away for 2 weeks. When that 2 weeks is over, return from vacation, I'm still as stressed as I was when I left. In fact, probably more so, because when I was gone for those 2 weeks, I was stressed about work. I was stressed about somebody in my house, just weird random stuff, and I always love that line. I'm like, I need to be a cowboy. I love this line from, this is another one that I remind, completely not related to the Bruno Kirby, or the Jack Palance line, but it's Bruno Kirby line. I like your ass, I want to wear it as a hat. I don't know why, but that's another line that stuck through. Different part of me that held on to that one.
Classic.
Right? It's a classic line. What other lines are there in that?
City Slickers held up. Like, his lines...
He'll never understand. The cows can tape something now.
Oh, genius.
It's a movie that holds up, surprisingly. I didn't think it would.
Another great thing about City Slickers is it covers a lot of ground. Not only is it funny and an adventure and all that, but it also covers like birth, death, love, marriage, infidelity, divorce, careers, family, friends. It touches all kinds of different parts of life.
I think the friendship aspect is huge in that film.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are some serious moments that happen. Like it stops for a second there for, the part where Phil freaks out with the gun at the one dude, and you're thinking he's gonna blow this dude away, and then what's gonna happen? So
that would have been an awesome.
I never thought that was going to happen.
I never thought that for a second.
Never thought that for a second. Yeah.
But that would have been amazing if
he
you just shot the guy and then it turns into this murder movie. I would totally love that movie equally.
Maybe that'll be good for City Slickers 3.
Here's what happened for me in this movie, seeing it with the other group of movies that we saw, and on the heels of just seeing When Harry Met Sally right before it, is this is where Billy Crystal starts to annoy me here, because all these movies are about him going through some sort of midlife crisis, and he just starts to become this whiny guy who seems to have a pretty good life in all of these by most accounts.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a pretty good job usually, a good family. Things are pretty good. Like we'll see him forget Paris. He's an NBA ref, which seems like a pretty good job too.
Mm-hmm.
But like and this becomes the source of his comedy and probably the source of his success over the years by taking advantage of people wanting to hear about this. Like he just becomes this whiny person where he's having these problems with his midlife crisis. And after a while, I'm like, come on, man, your life is not that bad.
So
Get over it.
was me and all of this. Oh, well, I really wanted the girl. Oh, well, then I got her, but now I don't want her.
Yeah.
But then I'll go look for some others and bang some cheerleaders. And no, I don't want that.
So
it's your mind, Goldilocks.
And what you were talking about with running with the Bulls. He's running with the Bulls and pissed off he's running with the Bulls.
Right. Well, he did take a horn up the ass.
Well, yeah, that would make me mad.
That would make me mad at that point.
I wish, though, that he changed up his roles a little bit. I wish that he changed up what his characters were about a little bit. Because I feel like a lot of, like, the 4 movies that we're talking about here, I feel like his characters have way too much in common. For being the different types of people that they are, they end up having way too much in common as a result of him.
I know that in When Harry Met Sally, what Reiner was saying in the behind-the-scenes stuff was that a lot of the lines that came out in the movie were from Billy and from his comedy and improvised on the spot. And a lot of times they're going, "What if we said this? What if we said this?" So I'm sure a lot of it is what he went through.
Yeah. And, it's funny because you see that in one movie, you see that even in 2 movies, When Harry Met Sally and City Slickers. But after a while, of the same character doing the same lines, I get really bored. And I think we'll see that's what happens when we get into the next 2
He's
films.
the Vince Vaughn of the 80s.
What are we going to do grade-wise for this? That's rough.
That's tough.
You know what? I'm going to give it an A because I cannot imagine the logistical nightmare of shooting with a herd of cows all the time. Always in the scene.
I also go with an A-, but I'm gonna preface this by saying it's a higher A- than the When Harry Met Sally A-.
I'm gonna give it a B, but I'm abstaining from the real one because I haven't seen it in a while. I tried to see it before this, and it just
I
didn't
think it's
happen.
wonderful. I just absolutely enjoy it.
I'll give it
it's
a
one
B+.
of my favorites. I could easily put this on my top 100, 150, somewhere around there.
The fact that I haven't seen it since I saw it last probably 10, 20 years ago, that kind of says something of it.
It does not age.
I would like to go back and see it because I think it would
well.
pop.
I mean,
I was
it's
pleasantly
beautiful. It's got a really good overall feel to the movie. I'm not a real fan of the very, very end. I am impressed that Jake Gyllenhaal was amazing in the role. When you hear my shoulder tick.
Jake Gyllenhaal, Jeffrey Tambor plays Mitch's boss, Lou.
Yeah. Young. Ooh.
Yardley Smith, who is the voice of Lisa Simpson, plays the girl who Phil's cheating with. With his wife. On his wife. So, I never understood why they never did a third one. Now...
Did you see Curly's?
I did.
I did not see the sequel.
I did. It's pretty awful.
Well, then you've answered your question.
Yeah, so why didn't you understand?
Well, I mean, I guess monetarily, I thought it would be worth it.
No, what it comes down to is dollars. So it's in an industry. So they didn't make the dollars they were looking at.
Right.
I'm sure that Billy said we can make this much, and they made that much, and that's the
let
end
me
of
be
that.
devil's advocate. I still think there's room for it because, I mean, unfortunately, Bruno Kirby died. But it doesn't matter because in the second one, he wasn't in it anyway, and they brought in John Lovitz. So they could do a third one because they still have the three guys.
They do not.
That is just a bad idea. It's a bad idea to make two, but that's what Hollywood does.
Yeah.
If there's this film that makes a success, hey, you know what? Let's put one together for $50 and people will just go see it. We don't have to make it good. We don't have to
And
make
Palance wasn't in it, right? Because he was dead.
Okay.
Wholehearted.
Jack Palance was not in it, right?
No, he was in it. He plays his twin brother.
He plays his twin brother.
His twin brother.
Okay.
Are you a ghost?
I think that's what killed it. Everyone's like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me! They're going with the twin brother."
They went to the
angle.
well.
Well, they had to go back to him. He was the
Hey,
reason
there are twins. That's not unheard of.
I work with one.
So I was thinking instead of doing the Wild West aspect, go back to like the Running of the Bulls thing in the beginning of the first one, and then do a third one where they do another Running of the Bulls, or I don't know.
Or they could get a time machine.
They get in a time machine and go back and see. Also, check out these film appreciation, criticism, discussion sites out too.
Digging Star Wars, the online journal of the films that inspired George Lucas to create the Star Wars saga. Please look for our next episode on diggingstarwars.blogspot.com. With that in mind, think, post, and accept my thanks for listening.
And check out comedyfilmnerds.com with comedians Chris Mancini and Graham Elwood, and featuring Nia Weekly as the kitten hands loving average moviegoer at comedyfilmnerds.com. Alright, so as I mentioned before, Lowell Gans, he is one of the screenwriters. He also wrote City Slickers. And David Paymer, who played Ira Shalowitz, one of the Ice Cream Brothers in City Slickers, he moves on to Mr. Saturday Night as Billy's brother in the movie.
Oh, that's right.
So those are the threads we're going to follow, and it takes us into Billy's first directorial effort, Mr. Saturday Night.
The movie basically is about a stand-up comic. It starts at the end, meaning it starts towards the end of his life.
I wish it started at the end.
It starts at at an end point or at a later point in his life, and it does a series of flashbacks to fill in the story and the backstory. It is about a stand-up comic. The best way I would describe him is a Don Rickles / insult comic. And it follows his career path from the start right through to the end. Now, the funny thing about the start of his career, you don't actually find that out until a good 10, 15, 20 minutes in when they're doing a flashback.
It does bounce around from
it's a series of flashbacks.
Yeah.
And I thought that the movie, for what it was well shot. And that's about as much as the nice things I can say about it. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but he was a jerk. His character, the reason that I was turned off from this film is the backstory. We were talking before, there's 29 minutes into City Slickers before they got to New Mexico. Well, they needed to do that with this film because if they had given it a solid backstory instead of starting with him mid-career or even closer to the end of his career, I think I would have been more invested in the character because I personally, in the first 5 minutes, hated the guy. His character didn't feel like it had redeeming qualities. The movie starts out with Mr. Saturday Night, which is his television show that he has on Saturday night. So he comes out and starts with a series of his insults. The third insult was his daughter, and that's where his character jumped the shark for me, and from that point forward, I had a difficult time. To me, you can pick on certain people. You don't pick on your daughter. I lost him, and I guess the last 5 minutes of the film, he tries to redeem himself.
Spoiler!
Believe me, you're not going to get a lot of people watching this film after you hear the
If
grades.
you make it that far, your life's already been spoiled.
You can't have 99% shit and then, oh, I swore,
It's
1%
okay, you're allowed.
of not crap and have you go, oh, I love this guy now. That's my personal belief, and that was the issue that I had. With entertainment, you have to be entertained, and you have to have something that you're invested in the character. I didn't have any of that at all.
This goes back to something that I've been saying throughout this, where I think Billy, especially because he wrote and directed this, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think he thinks he's a hell of a lot more charming and likable than he is. So when the movie starts, you're supposed to just sort of love this guy right away, I think, and think how great he is, and exactly, like within 2 minutes, he's insulted his wife and insulted his daughter. They're trying to play up the fact that, his comedy career is difficult for his young daughter to understand, and then later on that leads to problems in her life, although they never really get into you never really see any of those problems.
No,
happening.
they do discuss them.
They
They
just
do say,
mention them.
Yeah, they go, she was a drug addict,
Yeah.
and she's, I think, a felon as well.
Yeah.
But I can't remember exactly. But yeah, they briefly touch upon it.
And
Yeah.
I guess that was all the result of a couple insults.
Oh no,
at
no!
the start
Actually,
of the movie.
well, no. Billy Crystal. No. Billy Crystal actually works his daughter into his act.
Oh, that's right.
And the funniest part for me was when his, who was his newest, the person that takes on his career.
Helen Hunt.
Helen Hunt.
Oh, Hunt, yeah.
She goes, oh wow! He tells her, I won in 1958 for this act where my daughter comes up on stage and we do this act, and I was the comic of the year in 1958, I think is what he said. And she goes, oh, that's your daughter. And he goes, oh, no, she quit the act. She didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah. Oh, and she's like, do you have 2 daughters? And he's like, no, that's an actress.
That's an actress playing my daughter.
Yeah, playing his daughter. Like, he's a despicable guy. And I guess I respect Billy for trying to bring these characters to life. But it becomes very difficult to build movies around unlikable protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes very difficult to root for them over the course of the film. And sometimes I just don't understand what Billy's point is.
I was rooting for his brother.
Absolutely.
I'll be God honest truth.
Absolutely.
Every turn, like his brother loved his wife.
Right.
Absolutely loved. I mean, the very
Loved
first
Billy's wife.
Yeah, Billy's wife in the movie. That is.
Yes.
He's sitting there drawing pictures of this woman that he wants to be his future bride. Goes back to his brother and says, do I need to get you anything? What do you need? And he goes, the girl that you've been drawing a picture of, because he didn't know it, but he points her out. He goes, get her, bring her back, I want her. And he's like trying to figure out a way to say, no, dude, I want her. And he's like, no, go get her. You know how to do that. That's your job. Go do it. And that's another thing. He's just ordering people around through the entire film.
Yes.
And every time he gets an opportunity or a big break, he craps on it. Every single time.
And I don't feel like he ever really gets his comeuppance. I don't feel like he really learns from his mistakes. I don't feel like he changes in any way
There's no turning point.
that makes it worthwhile.
I think there's a lot of stuff that is missed because
Billy directed it?
It's possible. It's possible. Because I think we all agree that the woman who plays his wife, Julie Warner, a very likable character too. All I saw in that movie with those two was that she had nothing but love for him. She cared about him. There's only one scene in that movie where she actually gets mad at him, and it's the part where he yells at the daughter. But at the end of the movie, you can tell that she really cares about him, that she really respects him, that she really thinks he's a good person. And there are moments in the movie where he does redeem himself, as you said.
This goes back to an old adage: if you make a woman laugh, she's yours. I guess that I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but if a woman laughs, and they often take surveys like, what makes you like love a man, and it's the laughter aspect, and that's what happens. Billy makes her laugh. The brother doesn't, and and so the brother never had a chance. Even though the brother's the first to dance with her, the brother breaks all the ice for Billy, because goes up to the family and is like, I'm taking your daughter, I'm a podiatrist, which he's not. And just totally lies to them, no problem, brings her up and starts dancing, and then he figures out, and he's a cool brother, because he figures out, she's like, I want to meet your brother, period. And he's like, okay, I won't stand in the way.
I understand where you're coming from. I can understand why someone would be turned off by him. Being a student of like the Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy and Martin and Lewis, I studied that stuff growing up as a kid. I was just so into those kind of performers. And I believe that that's a performer's life. And Curly, they used to say Curly was an addict. He had all kinds of issues.
I don't give a damn. I love him.
And I think, in some weird way, Billy was trying to say this guy was kind of an addict of comedy, an addict of insulting. Because he's even sitting there at his mother's deathbed dropping jokes.
What did you like about this movie? What was it about this movie that makes you say this is a good movie?
I liked it because it was almost like the anti of what you guys are talking about. I think it was a story of a performer who got so into his work that sometimes it would affect his personal life. And there's parts of it where you're like, oh wow, he is a jerk. But then there's parts where you kind of like, you know what, there is a nice side to this guy. He's just
I didn't see any nice sides to this guy.
He's just so into his job that he's just.
But I find it inexcusable, and I feel like his redemption isn't big enough. Like,
there's no turning point. I think if they had had a major turning point.
The speech he gives at his mother's funeral, I thought that was pretty awesome. You wouldn't think that would come out of him. I think it just showed that, you know, it's a performer's life. I mean, he treated his daughter like crap.
Treated his daughter like crap. He treated his brother like crap.
Treated his wife like crap.
Certainly not every performer's life.
No.
I can't excuse an abusive douchebag.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I think he did a good job directing it. He had some really nice shots in it.
He did not do a bad job directing.
No, my major malfunction with the
bad story.
I didn't like the flashback way in which they handled it. I've watched plenty of films with flashbacks in it, but did anybody else feel it was jumbled and confused during some of the flashbacks?
No, I didn't get lost at all.
Not lost. I just felt that it could have been handled differently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It didn't. Yeah, the flashbacks didn't hammer tough stuff. A lot of times you're watching a movie and they do a flashback and you're like, oh my god, that was perfect, right at the right time, right at the right spot. This movie kind of seemed muddled with the flashback.
One side note, I would watch the deleted scenes on the DVD too. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the deleted scenes, which I thought a couple of those should have been in the movie because it would have explained a lot more and maybe it helped his character not be less hated. There's this.
That's a problem with editing then, if you took those out.
Yeah, I mean, it's also timing and stuff like that. The studio might have said, you gotta cut this back a hair, you know. You never know what really transpired with that. But,
yeah, that's a Hollywood question. Do you blame the director for the bad stuff? For the best things ending up on the editing floor, do you blame the studio? I understand that aspect of it.
Noted cameos in the movie. Bill Wendell, who used to be the announcer for Late Night with David Letterman. He's in that. He's the announcer for the Mr. Saturday Night Show. And there's just a fabulous cameo by Jerry Lewis, which I thought was fantastic.
I think that was probably the best part of the film, actually. It was like the screen lit up.
I forget he had a great insult.
You know what? I don't even remember now. I just remember him doing
the screen up, dude. He lit the screen up. Like, honestly, he was a shining light in that film. It was like a whole different film showed up when he got on screen. And, like, I have to be honest, I'm a fan, but I'm not the biggest Jerry Lewis fan. So, I mean, let's take that with a grain of salt. But when he walked on stage, I'm like, now there you go. A legend. He's there. And he did a couple riffs and walked off stage and he's gone.
And Billy's sitting at the table with Slappy White.
Slappy
White. And Carl Ballantine. Carl Ballantine was Gruber from McHale's Navy, which...
Well, honestly...
I just thought that was fabulous.
Honestly, if we actually knew comedians and we pan through that shot, I guarantee you there would be at least 10 to 20 or 30
friars. That whole room's probably full of comedians.
I forgot to mention the worst prosthetic nose ever.
The makeup, the makeup is what really kills it for me. Apparently, according to the DVD extras, Billy based the makeup on younger and older pictures of Frank Sinatra. They had.
I didn't like his prosthetic
Frank
nose
Sinatra
right from the get. I was like,
I didn't understand why they had to do that.
It didn't make sense.
I didn't understand why they had to do the nose. Why didn't they just let him have his own nose?
Yeah, any movie where your main character is going to spend like 75% of it in old makeup, it's kind of like, why not cast somebody else? And then have them spend 25% of the time in younger makeup. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Why not go in a reverse direction? Have an older guy and make him look younger.
Or if you're going to do that, spin the movie so that you're showing more younger scenes and fewer older scenes.
Yeah, I mean, hire a better company to do the makeup.
Yeah, that would help as well.
I feel like you didn't need, as many scenes where he's older.
No, absolutely not.
That could have been a Forrest Gump style epic where you span a long period of time, but you tell it in a more linear fashion.
I also really liked the work of David Paymer, who was his brother.
His brother was amazing.
In fact, he was actually nominated for an Oscar for that role.
I could actually see that. My major problem.
You didn't think he was?
He was great, but I mean, that role in that movie, I don't think it's Oscar worthy. He was very good.
It was a great supporting role, though.
In fact, Rich,
I mean, if you're going to give somebody an Oscar for supporting another character, he supported him through that whole damn film.
True, he did carry it.
In fact, you came up with a great thing the other night when we were watching the movie about his brother is kind of like the light side of him.
Yeah.
So
and you see, I think
he's the darkness, and his brother was the lightness.
I think as the comedy,
they were kind of a contrast.
I think as a comedy troupe, I would have loved them as a comedy troupe. But when his brother bails because he's chicken shit, well, not chicken shit, but I mean he got stage fright, and Buddy Young
which is a classic
back.
commentary on Shem Howard, by the way.
Yeah. So his brother can't bring him up on stage or can't get him on stage, and then he changes into Buddy Young Jr. It was at that point in the film that I went, like, up until that point when they were showing the flashbacks, we showed it in sequential order from the beginning of his life to the end of his life. I liked him in the living room. I even liked the way he was picking on his family. I was fine with that. I liked him when his brother and him were working on the different routines. I'm good with that. When he walks out on the stage by himself and the crowd pretty much is like, get the hell off the stage, you're a little kid and you suck. And then he turns on the fat man. That's the point at which I'm like, now I officially don't like your character anymore. Oddly enough.
Well, see, I didn't mind as a kid.
But he was a heckler, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a big fat man heckling him on stage, and he's
That's
a kid.
what comics do.
I was
Just ask
fine
Mike.
with him insulting him.
I was
with
him
you
insulting with.
where you had the problems with, here he is on his TV show right at the start of the film, and his second joke is an insult of his wife, and his third joke is an insult of his child, who he knows are watching in the green room. And so then it's just two shots of his daughter going. And the daughter's like, is that true? Like, after every joke. And I felt like either his wife needed to later say to him, hey, maybe you don't make jokes about our daughter, or like somehow that needed to be fixed. And the fact that it wasn't made him a pretty rotten guy to me.
Well, what's funny about it is it's a good parable for me not...
She was young, too.
Yes.
Young
good,
daughter.
A good parable about how not to be. I actually, at the end of the film, I'm like, the thing that I brought away from it is don't be like Buddy Young Jr., which if that's what he wanted to make a film of, then he did an amazing job.
Yeah, he didn't change.
The whole point is to make you feel better about yourself, I guess, this movie.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the point is, because there is a part of me that feels like Billy would tell you that his character changed. In the end, he became okay with who he was and was a better person. But as a viewer, I don't think he became a better person. I don't think he changed. I think he just dealt with the reality of him being a jerk, and it was a reality he had to deal with.
Right.
But he didn't make himself a better person.
Well, was this a personal commentary of the people he knew, or a different era, where he is sort of trying to translate that era and how comics were and how
that's what I
actors
think.
were to kids today?
I think
well, this is the 80s.
Regardless, I still think you could build that character to change in the end. He has opportunities to make decisions towards the end of that movie where he could show a little humility and in the process possibly gain some success. And
Well,
doesn't.
right. That's the point I was going
Maybe
towards.
that was the point. Maybe because if he was to change, it would be too Hollywood-esque.
There needed to be a point at the movie that he did change, because if he had had that tipping point where he jumped over that fence, then all of the crap that came before that I was pissed off about,
Right.
I think I would have flipped it, and all that hatred would have turned into love.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, this is why we have these conversations, because I like to see what different people take from the movie.
what's odd about
And
it
as
is
usual,
3 out of
I'm
4
the odd,
surveyed.
as usual, I'm the odd man out, but that's fine.
Okay,
Like,
now
usually
I'm going to start off with the ratings. I've been really, really, really trying to give this thing a C. Trying to give this a C.
You
and I
mean
can't.
to get up to a C?
Yeah, it's at a D plus at the best.
That's fine.
At the best.
Hey, that's cool. I enjoyed it. There was something about the movie that kept me into it. The only thing I really hated was the makeup effects. And
We can agree to disagree.
It got 5.7 stars on the Internet Movie
It should have gotten
Database.
2.8.
Which is like a C. I am I'm a big fan of late night television and comedians, but even with all that coming to it, I still just give it a D.
I honestly,
I didn't think
I'd
it was
love to meet-
horrible,
I'd
but-
love to meet someone that really loved Mr. Saturday Night. I would really love to meet that person, because I would want to hear what they tell me that they're finding that I didn't find in it.
My guess is it's an inside joke.
I wouldn't doubt that.
It is. The roasts that they used to do was much different than what it is now on Comedy Central.
Absolutely.
And that sort of roasts used to be done by friends. They had a personal knowledge of them, and they would bring up,
Remember that time
everything.
you were vomiting in the sink or whatever?
Nothing was taboo.
The old roasts were something where, like, if we as commoners were to walk into these comedy roasts, we would be A, appalled, B, shocked, and we couldn't believe that they were doing that to their friends. But that was the point.
Right. The worse you were, the more you
love
liked
them.
you. Yeah.
The more you love them. Yeah.
And they were friends.
So, and I'm sure that's what Mr. Saturday Night kind of
Was going towards.
But the disconnect there is the audience that was going to see it
Was not them.
was not in on the joke.
We're going to continue on with Billy Crystal as a director, because his next movie, Forget Paris, would be his next directorial effort. And I noticed a lot of similarities in both movies with his directing style, if you want to call it that. I thought it was interesting that it was the same kind of narrative flashback style in both movies.
Forget Paris is, surprise, surprise, a love story of on again, off again, on again, off again. Billy Crystal's character, I don't remember his name in the movie. What was it? Let's call him Tim.
Sure.
He's a ref.
Tim.
He's a ref in the NBA.
Mickey Gordon.
Mickey Gordon. That's a great name for a ref. While he's at the airport, the airline lost his father and the coffin.
The entire body.
Apparently it went to Switzerland, and he's living in the airport, and he's very frustrated, and he's angry, and nobody's helping him, and he finally gets a meeting with Deborah Winger, who heads up something at the airport.
Ellen.
Lost and
The
Found.
Lost Coffin
The Lost and
section.
Found. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens so often.
Yeah.
She works for the airline. I
Yeah,
guess,
she has an office with a desk,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
he goes in and sits with her, and it's I wouldn't say it was love at first sight kind of thing, but she helps him find his father's body, and through spending the day, Billy Crystal, he tells her the story about it, and he goes to bury his father alone, and she shows up there, and that for me is like the beginning of this. I don't even know what you'd call it, ping pong match of a relationship.
Yeah. It's very similar in some ways to When Harry Met Sally and every romantic comedy that came before it, with all this bouncing around.
Yeah, I think I was duped, because the first 10 minutes of this movie, I thought it was great. It was Billy Crystal humor. It was funny. It had great moments. There even a really touching moment when he's actually burying his father, and the two gravedigger dudes are standing there. It's a great Billy Crystal moment between them. And I love the whole opening with Charles Barkley and the fight with the thing. And I love the idea that the movie is based around his friends his friend telling his fiance around a dinner table that they're all going to meet at, telling the story of of Billy Crystal's life. And I thought all of this was interesting. Everything was great. I'm like, all right, Billy Crystal. I'm like, yeah, this is cute. It's good. And then comes Deborah Winger.
Yes. And then he has to go back home because the NBA season is starting. We also have to remember that not only are they bouncing back and forth with this relationship or whatever, but they're also bouncing back and forth from France to America, France to America.
Right.
So we have all this going on too.
Why again was she in France when she was a little girl? She had brothers, and her way of escaping was I don't know.
I forget.
I don't even remember.
It was something like she was running away from boys.
I think I yawned.
But she,
explanation.
she definitely has a running away aspect to her.
Yeah,
she does a
yeah,
lot of running away.
Yeah. Now he goes back home, but when is the first time that they meet? No, he came there. He was like he kept on doing really like bad calls during the thing, and like everybody was traveling no matter what was going on, and he wasn't calling fouls, and he was just doing a crappy job reffing because all he could think about was her.
Yeah, she shows up, doesn't
did she show up first to
I
America?
thought she showed up
No, I
first.
think he goes. No, he goes to France first. This is why this is a horrible goddamn
right.
movie. He goes to France and shows up because they were talking on the phone back and forth, and they have this great time. They're sleeping together. They're going to museums, which he doesn't do. They're eating out, and he's not. He's ordering off all kinds of crazy food.
Yeah.
And they're sitting at a bench, and he goes, "I love you," and she goes, "I'm married."
Yeah.
I'm like, wait,
It's
what?
like, where'd that come from?
This is dumb. This is really dumb.
Curveball.
And then he's like, but we're separated. And is he rich? Yes. Is he handsome? Yes. What happened?
Is he
Something
tall?
else. Is he tall? Yes.
Does he have a sister?
Yeah, that was a great line.
punchline.
Great Billy Crystal line, you know. Yeah.
I didn't hate this one either.
Here's the problem.
Wait till you get to the end.
Yeah. So they're in France for the first time that Billy comes over, and they fight, and Billy goes, "Well, I want to be with you." And he goes back, and he even has a worse time reffing. And his whole life there's no direction or meaning. He sleeps around, and she shows up in like Carolina or something at his door at a hotel, and because some people are banging next door and making noise and stuff, she shows up, and all of a sudden, she gives him the line of, "Do you sleep with the window open? That's gonna be a problem." Okay, so they get married, and I'm like, all right, whatever. So he has to leave again. Once they have this great 3 months together, and it's all so romantic on the beach and blah, whatever. And he has to go back to work, so he's now on the road, and she's there by herself. She works at Burbank Airport, which I've been to. You do not want to work at Burbank Airport. It is nasty. Last time I flew into Burbank, lost my luggage.
Oh, jeez.
It wasn't my dad's coffin or anything, but it was still.
That's fantastic.
Lost my damn
so you can relate. No wonder you hate this movie.
All right, it brings me back. So she wants him to stop that life and become a used car salesman with her buddy, and he's like, "Oh, I don't really want to do that. This is fun." But he does. It saves their relationship from breaking up because she was, "I'm gonna come back to France," and it saves their relationship. So now she gets promoted in her job, and Billy Crystal hates everything and everybody because she has to live at home with her nuts father, which I thought was funny that he would read all of the signs when driving down the road. I'm going to try that.
Yes.
See how that goes.
Her father is played by William Hickey,
Awesome.
who played Uncle Lewis in the Christmas Vacation movie.
He was very, very good. Even
And
in this movie, which I did not like, he was fun.
He was, He's the one who burns the Christmas tree down.
He's a genius.
Very fun.
He's hilarious. I mean,
What did he keep on
fantastic.
repeating over and over again?
You asked for it, you got it, Toyota. The scenes with him and Billy, I thought were hilarious. With him standing behind him doing the knife thing.
Yeah.
We're back at the dinner table.
Oh yeah, and it keeps coming back at the
We're back at the dinner table. We don't know if they're
they're
going
together,
to show
if they're
up,
not
if they're
together.
what's
I thought they
happening.
weren't.
And
He's
we're
reffing.
waiting for him to get there from reffing at the Knicks game.
Yeah, he's reffing and drops the ball, and he's like, "I gotta go," and he runs to the exit. There's 14 exits at a stadium.
This is
he
during
runs
the
to
national
right
anthem.
one. Yeah, during the national anthem
Of the Knicks game.
And there's Deborah Winger waiting for him. Look, at this point, it's been on and off and on and off. I don't care if she's there.
But in this moment, it's so far-fetched because in this moment, he has decided, you know what? I gotta go find her right now, right before this basketball game. I'm out of here, and I'm leaving. right at that exact same moment, she comes walking
Yes.
onto the court at Madison Square Garden, which you can't do too easily,
Yes.
mind you, for security reasons.
Yes.
She comes walking onto
Yes.
the court while the national anthem plays. And it's just this moment where it's like, oh, they both decided at the same time, although
Right.
clearly she decided a little bit earlier because she flew from France. But they decided at the same time that
Yes.
they need to be together,
Yes.
and then, oh, there they are together, and they kiss, and then they show up at dinner.
Yeah.
And it is the most ridiculous, far-fetched. And aliens could have come, and it would have been just as
Plausible.
plausible.
Uh-huh.
The ending is difficult to handle. Absolutely.
Well, what's funny is, remember I said I have not seen this film? I lied. I had seen this film when it came out, whenever it came out.
I didn't hate it.
You have to hate that ending, Phil.
I
You
do.
cannot-
I do not. That ending is ridiculous.
And for multiple reasons. One, far-fetched.
And the way you
Two,
explain it makes
why,
it makes much more sense.
Why should we believe that they're back together for good now? This has been on again, off again, as, more times than when Harry Met Sally was on again and off again.
Yeah, when Harry Met Sally, there's actually a beginning and an end. You kind of are sold the idea that they will stay together. But in this movie, you're like, okay, the movie's ending. What happens next? They're going to break up in a
They're
few
together
months.
for dinner tonight.
So what's funny about when you guys were talking about this, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, Billy Crystal was the writer and the director. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, he likes basketball and he likes France. How do we put them into a movie so I can go to France and get the studio to pay for it?
Yeah.
And I get to be on the basketball court with all these basketball players I really like.
Yes.
So it's kind of like he wrote the film around it. And it's not unrealistic for an entertainer, I'm putting the quotes in the air, to have a walk right onto the Madison Square Garden floor.
Sure.
So from the real human,
Right.
it's kind of like I'm a star so high up here, I can do whatever I want. But when you translate it down to the regular person who's actually sitting in the seat, they're like, huh?
I thought his directing got better in this one. There were some really neat misdirection things going on. Like the very first scene it opens up with this lady. I was.
Oh, I love the
That
opening.
shot.
Yeah, that's why the first 10,
first 10
15 minutes of this,
were
I'm like,
great.
I'm in. I like it.
That shot, I'm thinking we're in a church or,
Well, look, it looked like
something's
a
going
house.
on. And
She was in
it's
her
the lady
practice.
with the organ, and then she turns to do the organ, and the camera swings by, and it's
You're
an
in a
NBA
basketball
game.
game,
yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that
Now,
was
I'm
pretty
I'm telling
cool.
you, watch
Why
it
does
again. That was a dude in drag.
Really?
Watch it again, I'm telling you.
All right.
No,
I'll
why?
check that
I
out.
guess what it comes down to for me from listening to this, because I remember it a hell of a lot better now that you guys are talking about it. Why does it have to be all or nothing? Meaning, Billy has to move, or she has to move. You have to give up your thing. I have to give up my thing.
Well,
There's
that's
like
just,
no
that's
compromise.
just relationships.
That's
Yeah.
not true. You got to make
That was
compromises
the
here.
Yeah, but
conflict
that's a
that they
huge
had
compromise.
in
Yes,
this movie.
Yeah, that's like a life-changing
France
compromise to
and
go from
America,
NBA basketball ref, which is
To a used car
impossible to do,
salesman,
Yeah.
to a used car salesman.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I-
even questionable because it's like, all right, because she at one point was like, can't you ref like high school games? It seems like there would be another job that'd be slightly more plausible for her
Yeah.
to go to.
But then
Yeah.
again, I was kind of surprised that she decided to send the father off to Wichita with her two brothers. I thought that was pretty big.
I liked his character before he met her. I liked his sarcasm. I liked his, antics on the court, the whole idea. I liked that character. If it was going in that direction, I'm like, all right, it's kind of funny.
Yeah,
Well,
and-
but it was the whole,
Yeah.
I got the girl, now I don't want the girl. It's not as important. It's the whole newness of the relationship wore off, and now,
Well,
I'm going to go bang some cheerleaders now.
I really think that, especially Forget Paris. Forget Paris is like a classic example of a movie that was bought and sold on the first 10 minutes of the script. Because it was great once it was made. I can even imagine it in written form just being like, wow, this is great. All this stuff is happening. It's joke. We quickly get into the fact that, we have... he's an NBA ref. We have NBA All-Star cameos, but we also get into his father's coffin is lost. Isn't that crazy? And we meet the girl all in 10 minutes, which if you read that script, you'd be like, this is going to be an amazing movie. Let's make it.
Yeah.
It's the elevator talk.
And then there's 110 more pages of that script that are awful because they did it all right there in the beginning.
Right.
And
they just took it too far. It became a documentary of a real relationship, and I'm like, boo.
And then they ended with a happy
and
Disney ending.
And there's no way I believe they woke up in the morning and we're all like, this is it. We're happy forever.
Forever now, right?
You know, and I think that was part of the point of the movie was
Yeah.
to show that relationships are tumultuous and rocky at best. But
Well,
I didn't care. I didn't care at all. I wanted him to get back to his
Show up for dinner already.
Yeah.
So this movie can end.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that's the problem that you run into. You gotta like the character. You gotta care.
Yeah.
You gotta have something vested in it. If you
Yeah.
don't, then who gives a flying F, and let's move on.
Absolutely.
Let's not even finish the popcorn and leave the movie theater.
cameos in this film, getting back to the whole Simpsons thing, Julie Kavnar, who is Marge Simpson's voice.
Oh,
She
yeah.
plays Lucy.
She's at the dinner table.
Who is one of the friends telling the story of what's going on with in Forget Paris. And Dan Castellano,
I think so.
I don't know.
who plays Homer Simpson. He's Homer Simpson's voice. He has the cameo as the car salesman.
And Charles Barkley. You guys
And
were talking about
and there's a ton of basketball dudes. Yeah.
Actually, I was shocked at how many basketball players they
My
had
personal
in the
belief
very
was that
beginning.
he has a basketball crush, and this is a great
He
way
does.
to fulfill
He
that
does. He's a
basketball
huge
crush.
Knicks fan.
Yeah,
I think he has season tickets to the Knicks. Sits in the front row all the time.
I don't know. This might be a problem of mine, but I still have a hard time trying to watch Joe Montana be in like a non-serious,
I thought
in a
it was
comedy.
fine.
I
He
mean,
was fine in his role.
But he had. I think he has the funniest line in the movie.
What's
He
that?
he grew up in a family that the dog committed suicide in. He left a note. I can't take it anymore. Chi-Chi.
I love the lines that you love. Because they're just so random.
remember that, but
I do remember that line.
I may have laughed at it.
It was done in a VO style.
Montana was good. I didn't mind the story structure of that. I mean, the storytelling device of that movie, but
It's not that he did a horrible job with the technical aspect of this. It was just the storytelling. I'm sure that script for Forget Paris looked a whole lot better on paper than it did when it came out. I just think that was Deborah Winger may have thrown me out of it too.
Yeah.
If somebody else would have been in that role, maybe it would have been different for me.
that seems
And
like the
again, I
type
don't
of
want to
ending that
bash
they-
her because I
he
still
did
think
in
she's a
last
talented
yeah,
actress.
yeah, exactly.
But I don't know. In the first half of that movie, she seemed like her voice was breaking up, and she just seemed like she was making weird faces. She had like a lazy eye going on, and
Yeah.
a few other things. And I'm like, what's going on with her? And then all of a sudden, bam! Middle of the movie, she all of a sudden started to get her game on, and it seemed like she was the one doing pretty good, and everyone else seemed kind of
Yeah,
off.
I'm sure it was a choice, but
Yeah, I don't know what happened in there.
What are we doing grade-wise for Corey?
you might be shocked by this. I'm gonna give it a C.
That's the funny part about it for me because, like, while I bash it,
I don't think it was a horrible movie. If they had fixed the ending, it would have been much better. I mean, the ending is just like a stomach punch that I just didn't need. So I will give it a C minus.
What I used to like to do with Phil Meets the Movies last year was do a lot of new things. So it was kind of hard to find something new that Billy's been involved with. In the last 10 years, he's only been in 3 movies. In the last 5 years, he hasn't been in any. But he does have some stuff in the pipeline. He's going to do a sequel to Monsters, Inc., which is coming out in 2013, called Monsters University. But he did do a short film with his daughter. In City Slickers, his daughter is played by his real-life daughter, Lindsay Crystal, who ends up directing a short movie called When Harry Met Sally 2, starring Billy Crystal and Helen Mirren. It's a 4.5-minute long movie that you can find on funnyordie.com. It's the sequel to When Harry Met Sally.
I actually enjoyed it. Yeah, you made me watch
I
it,
made
and I
Rich
was
watch
kind of.
it.
I was like,
I
I don't
guess
wanna
you
watch
guys
this,
all
and
watched it.
and I thought it was funny.
I laughed my ass off.
Billy
Yeah.
actually went around and went on talk shows promoting that short.
Oh,
That's
did he really?
awesome. Yeah,
Good.
I saw him on like the Daily Show, I think.
Oh,
and,
really?
Now that part of it, I think, is genius.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
vampires.
But it brings us back to what we were talking about. Him and Rob Reiner have been friends for so long that they decided to do this, and they do it in a style where the two of them are trying to pitch the idea to some Hollywood studio guys to see if we could do a sequel to When Harry Met Sally. But apparently Sally's dead, So now they got to do this thing where it's just him and what's going on, what happened after that, even though one of them is dead. So then they bring in Helen Mirren in the Sally role.
Their satire of Hollywood is spot on. Let's be honest. I mean, I'm not a Hollywood type by any stretch of imagination, but I totally see that happening. Let me take whatever idea you had and throw it on the ground, step on it, smash it to the ground, and then that's what it'll become.
But set it up like this. Just one small tweak.
Right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
But what was really good about it is they kept hitting on parts about the original movie that kind of brought that nostalgia out, like the whole interviewing part with the two people sitting in the chair.
I love that. I'll roll the window down.
That was so funny because the part I remembered was the scene where they're lying in bed together and he's got his eyes wide open.
Oh, yeah.
And they did that with Helen Mirren, and I had forgotten about the part with the window.
At the end of the day, I think Billy's a comic genius. I think that his writing, directing during that time frame, I personally just didn't enjoy.
A lot of comedy comes from sarcasm
and a dark place.
And Don Rickles, insult kind of stuff.
I would say a dark place because I think insult comics come from that kind of dark place.
Yeah, but I think there's a certain point during all these movies where you sometimes get annoyed with Billy, and I think
for that reason.
That brings back what he was saying.
I think a source of a lot of his comedy is from like
and
sarcastic, bitter place.
But I don't think you're supposed to take from that he's a prick or whatever. I think it's how you receive the comedy.
So if you're acting bitter a lot, and that's your role, I think it just gets into you. I don't know how you would avoid that. Honestly.
Well, art imitates life, life imitates art. I found a thread through a lot of these movies was daddy issues for me. It just felt like, in Forget Paris, that was right in your face about daddy issues. But City Slickers, too, kind of brought me there because, Jack Palance was more like this tough figure that he never had in his life. That's a real man.
And Bruno Kirby's character had issues with his father.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense, actually, now that you say that.
Billy Crystal always comes off as like a ladies' man. He's like 4'2".
I know.
That goes back to I think something I've been saying all night, where I feel like he has, and it's even what you were just saying about like this walking onto the court. He has this false sense of self and reality that the rest of us don't share. So when he's a jerk, I'm like, well, he can't afford to be a jerk. He's just a tiny little guy that nobody would like if he didn't have tons of money. But he doesn't get that. He thinks he's a charming guy, a charming character.
The entertainment industry does
you can't deny it. He is a star.
He is a charming guy.
But he's not when he's playing these characters. He's not a star.
Yeah.
That charm.
Oh, I thought you were saying just it's all about Billy.
No, but I feel like he brings that to his characters. But his
I'm
characters
Billy,
can't
therefore I
have
can
that.
be a jerk, and you'll
Right.
still love me because
Right.
I'm Billy.
Okay.
Right. Now,
That's
Harry
fair.
Met Sally.
That's
He was
fair.
just a jackass in that car, spinning
Yeah.
ribs, went insane. But what he did say during that point makes sense. I mean, the
Yeah.
whole men and women can never be friends.
Right, because the guy's always
He's got a whole dialogue. Now, how many times has that been quoted? He's kind of right. But he's a jerk
it's
about
appropriate
it.
for the time period.
Right.
It's supposed to be late 1970s. Those are opinions he
Yeah.
can have. It's not ideal if this is the character you're supposed to sort of root for as
Right.
you go on, and
Right.
he's that much of a jerk. But-
Jerk.
I don't really believe that Billy Crystal is like these characters. It just seem to come out that they're kind of.
Again, going back to is the guy in real life the way he is on screen, that can't be true 99% of the time.
There's a common thread, and it's a common thread that he can't
For a
just
reason.
be, doing on purpose. It's part of who he is.
Billy Crystal wrote America's Sweethearts. And not a lot of people know it, not a lot of people like it. I'm like the one person that really likes that film. It's John Cusack, Julia Roberts, and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yes.
I love that movie. There's certain parts of that movie that I think is a really good look into
What's it called again?
Hollywood.
America's
Sweethearts.
Sweethearts.
And he has this great line in there. He's teaching Seth Green. Seth Green is taking his place, and he's been fired as the PR guy for the movie company. And he goes, you know what? The most important thing is the movie. By far, the most important thing is the movie. If your mother dies, you go down in front of the press and you tell them, it's a shame. It's a terrible tragedy. My mother would have loved this film. I think that is Hollywood. That is what this is. The most important thing in your life is this movie. And he had some great social commentary. I thought the movie was funny as hell. And Christopher Walken played the director.
Was he? He was
brilliant.
Was he a writer, director, actor in that film?
He was a writer, actor. I don't think he directed it. I'm not sure. But I mean, for me, that movie was Billy Crystal. You know, he was an agent. He wasn't this guy trying to have this giant character arc.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it, he's the same guy, and he's funny.
This is what I would say about Billy Crystal. I don't think he's a lead. I think he's built to be another character in your film, but I don't think he's built to be your lead.
I think he's a great straight man too. I don't know, like he just hits you upside the head with a line, and you're like, damn.
He is. I know all this bashing on Billy Crystal, and really, how can you not admire him? He's brilliant, genius, awesome.
We can do a different podcast where it sounds like we really like Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I hope you had a good time.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Rich.
Anytime.
Next month, the Dying Breed Movie Club will discuss the similarities between the Marx Brothers classic A Night at the Opera with its 1992 remake starring John Turturro called Brain Donors.
All right.
We'll see you all in the movie aisles, everyone.
Creative consultant, Chris Mitch. Technical director, Rich Shumaker. Special thanks to Sean Conti, Scott Kincaid, and me, Paula Burke. The Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies is produced by Deep Lake Pictures Entertainment and has no connection to any of the movies, artists, or motion picture companies seen or discussed in the Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies whatsoever. Copyrights for films, images, sound bites, trademark characters, and related materials discussed in the Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies remain with their respective owners. All materials are solely used for criticism, discussion, and artistic interpretation based on the fair use laws of the United States.